Today we have Harrison Stanley speaking from Stanley Law and PA, and he'll be speaking to us about bankruptcy basics.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Harrison Stanley. I am an attorney. I help people out with different issues. One of the issues is bankruptcy. If someone is a few months behind on their house, bankruptcy can help them develop a plan to repay what they owe and keep up with current payments. If someone has too many credit card debts, if someone's kid has, you know, too much debt, the bankruptcy can help wipe it out and give them a fresh start. The reason I didn't want to put the slide up first is bankruptcy is still a process that can have unanticipated consequence to the amount you pay or the lack of disposable income you have if emergencies come up, absent really exceptional circumstances. So, what I'd like to do is, I'd really like to ask anyone that is thinking about bankruptcy or that has some financial issues to first contact other people in our community before going through bankruptcy. Bankruptcy is an option, but it should be the last option. If you have a small business and you're struggling, please contact Sean. I'm sure he can send you to uh, uh, other professionals that can help you get a loan or look for other circumstances. If you need financial assistance, I'm sure you could go to Michael and get direction on how to proceed from there. If you need accounting because you're not sure, your things are so chaotic that you're not sure how much money is coming in, how much money is going out, where it's all going, contact Susie or Mark. I'm sure they can help you. If your home is you're not sure if it's underwater, over water, you're not sure what your options are, talk to Matt. I'm sure he could give you good advice. And if you just need to reach out to someone in the community, contact NFA or contact Yaseni for marketing and resources. If you have a business and you need to look at payroll options, contact Sasha. So there are a lot of resources here that should be looked at before going to bankruptcy. If you could put the presentation up now, I'll go through it fairly quickly, but I just want to emphasize bankruptcy is the last option, but there are many resources in the community you should rely on before going to bankruptcy. Yeah, this is just to cover bankruptcy basics. We'll go pretty quickly. Next slide, please. There are several types of bankruptcy. Chapter 7 is for individuals that are relatively low income. For one person, the cap is around 52,000. For a family of three or four, it's around 70 to 84,000 as of this year. If you're over that, or if you're behind on your home or behind on your car, you can choose Chapter 13, which is a 3 to 5 year repayment plan where you pay the amount past due as well as pay the ongoing expenses. Chapter 11 is reorganization for a business or for a wealthy individual. Last year, or 2019, they instituted the subchapter 5 for small businesses. And uh, from March of last year to March of this year, they've raised the debt limit to file under subchapter 5 to 7.5 million. As of the end of March, it'll drop down to 2.5 million. Chapter 12 is for farmers and fishermen. If you could go to the next slide, please. Chapter 7 is for liquidation. Again, it's for people that don't have that much. If they give you exemptions and allowable amounts to exclude from being considered for collection, if you're the amounts of assets that you have, the things in your home, the equity in your car, the amounts of money in your bank account, uh, assets, belongings being held in storage, if the value of those assets exceeds what you're allowed to be exempted, to be kept out of bankruptcy. The person that administers the bankruptcy for the court, called the trustee, would ask you to either repay your overage of the assets, or the trustee would ask you to turn over. Usually, they're not going to go in your house, they just want the cash, and they take a surcharge of that and then administer it to pay off a portion of the debts that you owe. Chapter 13 is a repayment plan, again, for a secured asset such as a house or a car. You would pay what you owe that's past due. and then you would also pay the ongoing bills that come in over 3 to 5 years. The issue with Chapter 13 is you have to pay out all disposable income other than your necessary expenses. That becomes difficult because things come up, emergencies come up, and sometimes people just can't make it work over 3 to 5 years. So while it is an option, half of the time, Chapter 13 bankruptcies don't work out. So that does take a little bit of consideration and thought beforehand. Next slide, please. Individual consumers usually try to file either 7 or 13. As I said before, income is usually the the factor to decide between a Chapter 7 or 13. There is a test that has been instituted into bankruptcy law called a means test. That's what I was referring to earlier when I said if you earn over 52,000 for one person, or my apologies for that interruption. If you're over 52,000 as an individual or over 70 to 84,000 as a family, you may have to file Chapter 13, or you may have to do a lot of math and go through these formulas using IRS calculations for average expenditure per month for food and clothing and other expenses. That's something we can work out as well, but the income usually is the key to determine whether you go into Chapter 7 or 13. Next slide. And here are the median amount household incomes. Those are determined initially by the IRS, as the IRS collects tax information each year, and as the Department of Health and Human Services calculates the poverty level and the various income levels and expenditures, and they've come up with these amounts to file Chapter 7. Um, and the only exception is if most of your debt is related to a business, then you really wouldn't consider Chapter 7. You would consider Chapter 11 and possibly the um, subchapter 5 that I mentioned earlier. Next slide, please. The exemptions I mentioned before, if you don't own a home, then you get to exclude $4,000 worth of value in all of your assets. That can be jewelry, that can be clothing, that can be a car, that can be electronics and household goods in your house. There could be collectibles or sporting equipment or guns. If you do own a home under Florida, you can protect the equity in your homestead. Um, if you do own a home, however, you cannot protect 4,000. You can only protect $1,000 worth of assets. Separately, you can protect $1,000 worth of equity in one motor vehicle. The other motor vehicles could either be covered by a portion of the wildcard exemption, or they may be an overage that you'll have to pay to the trustee. Florida law does allow you to protect the full value of your IRAs, pensions, or 401ks, provided that you're not taking money in or taking money out within the last year or so before filing bankruptcy in an unusual way other than normal um, debits from your paycheck into the IRA. Prepaid college accounts are protected. Cash value of life insurance policies is protected. And tenancy by the entirety properties are protected. Next slide, please. Some dischargeable debts in bankruptcy include rent, utilities, telephone bills, credit card bills, medical bills, including doctor and hospital bills, most legal bills, personal loans that are not secured, business debts, and court judgments. And next slide, please. Non-dischargeable debts include domestic support obligations, including but not limited to alimony and child support. In some cases, whether a school uniform or whether certain vacation expenditures are considered domestic support obligations pursuant to the final dissolution of marriage judgment. That's a matter to go under further consideration. Most student loans also are not dischargeable, meaning they'll survive bankruptcy and you'll owe them after the bankruptcy is concluded. Federal and state taxes less than 3 years old. There are some exceptions to that we can discuss. Judgments from fraud or theft are not dischargeable. If you are intoxicated and someone dies and you owe money to the family, those debts will survive bankruptcy. If you purchase expensive items within 90 days of filing bankruptcy, uh, or there's a sudden large round withdrawal of money within 90 days, that can be avoided by the trustee, meaning they can pursue the person that received the funds and go through the court system to get that money back and apply it to a portion of your debts. And then if you don't include debts in your petition, in some cases, that those debts can be determined that it can be determined that you did not want to uh, you didn't want to include those debts in bankruptcy, so those debts should be held against you, and you should be held liable for those debts after the bankruptcy case concludes. Next slide, please. Bankruptcy can eliminate many different types of bills. If your tax liability to the federal government is over 3 years, in some cases it can eliminate that. If you have garnishment, it has to stop when you file bankruptcy. There is an implicit injunction called an automatic stay that is placed on all collection efforts against you, state and federal. You just need to notify the attorney or the party garnishing you or suing you that the bankruptcy case has been filed, and there are official documents to do that. Um, it can eliminate deficiencies from short sales or mortgage deficiencies from foreclosure, repossession of car deficiencies or boats. It can stop a foreclosure of a house. You need to be careful with that because if the bankruptcy needs to be filed in enough time for the attorney to then file a document with the state court saying that the bankruptcy is filed, and that state court document needs to be delivered to the sheriff in enough time to stop the foreclosure. So filing bankruptcy at 8 in the morning is not going to stop a foreclosure at 10 in the morning. You need a couple of days lead time for that to happen in most cases. It can stop a creditor lawsuit against you, such as credit card companies suing, and it can stop the repossession pending resolution of the matter, either through repayment or reaffirmation of debt, where you agree to pay it outside bankruptcy, or just giving up the property and walking away from the deficiency debt. Next slide, please. The automatic stay, as I mentioned earlier, is the injunction that stops all pending litigation. And if any of the creditors contact you after that, other than through the bankruptcy court, then they violated the law. And that's something for your attorney to bring up before the judge. Next slide, please. Will you lose your home if you file bankruptcy? If you're Chapter 7, you need to be current on your house and car. If you're behind in your house and car, and you want to keep it, then Chapter 13 is your better option. Chapter 13, as I said before, can allow you to institute a payment plan and keep your home. You'll just have to stick to the plan fairly strictly over 3 to 5 years. And will filing a bankruptcy stop a foreclosure? Yes, as I mentioned before, it can. And as long the biggest thing is to just keep your attorney informed what's going on as far as what paperwork you're receiving. Have you received the actual foreclosure notice? Has it been scheduled? And anything else going on with the case? Will the filing of bankruptcy stop credit harassment? Yes. When the bankruptcy is filed, the automatic stay is initiated and they cannot contact you. And again, if they do, that's a violation of law. The bankruptcy will end garnishments, and um, the party garnishing the wages or bank account will need to go through the court to reinstitute it. Can you scroll down? And then, is your spouse required to file bankruptcy? No. Um, it depends. If it's a joint debt, that may be advisable, but if the debt is only to one spouse, then you don't have to file with your partner. Next slide, please. Before you file bankruptcy, the law requires that you complete an online course. There are a list of courses available on the court website. They can range anywhere from $10 online to $40 or $50 by phone. There is there are a series of schedules, and there is a petition that needs to be filled out when you file, and that's something that I or another bankruptcy attorney can help you out with. You need to be current in filing your federal income taxes, and you need to bring several types of documents, car registration, if you own the car outright, car title, bank statements, pay stubs for the last 6 months, because the trustee and the bankruptcy court need to see your financial trend. Have you been spending your money responsibly? Have you been falling further behind? Or have you been spending your money irresponsibly, thinking that you can get over by filing bankruptcy after you go on several vacations? They want to see pay stubs for 6 months. They want to see debt collection letters. A debt collection effort broke the law. They attempted to harass you by using improper language. They attempted to act or pretend to be an attorney, or pretend to be a judge, or pretend to be a sheriff when they're really not. Um, so that's why they want to see debt collection letters. Also, debt collection letters to make sure that all of the debts that you owe are cited in the bankruptcy, to make sure that they're wiped out. Lawsuits filed against you, again, to make sure that all of your debts are being addressed, and IRA and pension statements to make sure that those are protected in the bankruptcy, and that we're being truthful and diligent and forthright with the trustee and bankruptcy court. Next slide, please. The bankruptcy petition and schedules and statements that you sign and that are filed by the attorney must be signed under oath. You have to detail all of your assets and liabilities. They'll detail your income and expenses. And again, when you file, the automatic stay will protect you from creditors and debt collection efforts. And as stated before, will help you prepare the petition and the schedules based on questions that we ask. It may be in a formal questionnaire, it may just be in discussion. Next slide, please. Around 30 days to 45 days after the petition and schedules and other statements are filed with the court, the clerk's office, well, actually right after you file, the clerk's office will schedule a meeting of creditors. Creditors usually don't attend. My apologies for the interruption. Usually creditors don't attend the meeting. It's really just for you to talk with the trustee. The attorney would be there. The trustee is going to ask you a few questions based on the paperwork, the schedules, petition, the statements that were filed. Usually the meeting's held in downtown Tampa. Because of COVID for the last year, it's being held by phone, and it lasts about 3 to 5 minutes. And creditors almost never attend, only if you're a high value individual. You'll be asked questions regarding your bankruptcy petition and schedules, why you filed. If you are appearing in person in the old days, you would have to bring your social security card and photo ID. Now they make you send pictures of them and selfies of you holding them, and we electronically turn those in when the bankruptcy is filed to verify your identity. Next slide. And if your bankruptcy is successful in a Chapter 7, meaning they determine you have no assets, or if you pay the overage, the amount of assets you have over the allowable exemptions and wildcards, then the bankruptcy court will issue a discharge after the 341 meeting, or a few months later when the payments are made for the overage. If it's a Chapter 13, the discharge can be entered when all planned payments have been made. Next slide, please. And there's my contact information. I'll also put it in the chat. Please feel free to contact me if you have any questions. I can either answer them now or afternoon today. And thank you very much for your time and for having me at this meeting.
Any questions, anyone?
I have a question. How many times can you Like, can you keep doing this? Is there a limit on how many
Oh, if
times you
you,
can file? Or
yes, if you file Chapter 7 and if you receive a discharge, you cannot file 8 years. So if you file January 1st for Chapter 7 and it was successful, you would have to wait for, if you file on January 1st, 2021, you're going to have to wait till January 1st, 2029 to file again. For Chapter 13, you have to wait 6 years from the date that you file if your payment plan is successful. Under most circumstances, there are a few where you could file sooner, but
Awesome.
thank you.
It's interesting because I had no clue about the entire process, and you kind of clarified a whole lot of information about, how that works and what's protected and what's not. There's a lot of misinformation out there, and I'm glad you went through the basics behind it because, it's not necessarily that you're going to be in bankruptcy, but you might have a family member or a friend or somebody who's going through a lot of trouble, and you could save them a lot of trouble. You could save them a lot of anguish and pain thinking about their options and, understanding it and pointing them in the right direction.
Harrison, what's been the experience so far with COVID-19? Have you seen a lot of bankruptcies in your line of work? Is it uptick in 2020? What's kind of been the feel of things since that's your area of expertise?
it seems to have slowed down. A lot of people appear to be waiting out. I just looked at the statistics. Overall, for last year, the numbers are down. It's down about a fifth from the year prior, 2019 to 2020. So far in January, it stayed consistent with January of 2020. So it may be getting back to normal, but I think people have been shut in and they've been waiting to see state aid, what's coming in, federal aid, what's coming in. If I'm not spending a lot of money, maybe it's okay, even though I don't have a lot of money coming in. So I think people are just waiting it out.
Thank you.
Well, yeah, I think that's probably the case. A lot of people, for a lot of things, are waiting on things. They're kind of just like stand still. Mark, were you going to say something?
Yeah, there's some programs for people who are not paying their mortgages. They've got deferrals or such like that. Do you think that's just going to really become the log jam in a little while when that starts getting released again? Because they keep pushing it out 6 months, pushing it out 6 months, and then you find that you're telling them you're going to have to pay it eventually. But then do you think it's just going to become that log jam at the end where it's all going to hit the fan?
I agree. Not only foreclosures, but I have friends that represent tenants and in evictions, and they're starting to see an uptick because some of the courts are allowing eviction proceedings to continue. And so a few of those folks are trying to wipe out their past due debt under bankruptcy. They can't afford to put an escrow, maybe into court to stay in their apartment, so might as well leave. But yes, going back to foreclosures, I think in about 3 to 6 months, when people run through their options, it'll explode probably summer or early fall.
Yeah, I could piggyback on back of that. We're looking at that quite a bit. I know locally in the county, there's a lot of concern in certain communities here locally, where they estimate up to 25 to 30% of the community could be affected by that locally in certain areas. So that is definitely something to watch, Mark. You're absolutely right.
And what numbers do we usually watch? Is it the foreclosure number or is it the bankruptcy number or is it both?
There's a metric banks have where people are late, and there's a tracking mechanism. I can't remember the name of it, but there's an actual like percent late that all banks use. And right now, it's based on what the income is. If your income typically falls below $50,000, that's where you're seeing a lot of the forbearance coming into play and standing by on. I don't have the number. I'll get it to you, Zini, because I look at it quite a bit. So
That's a good measurement. And, a lot of people will halt on a lot of things because of that. And I think the number of the summer is a good, yeah, that's probably going to be it.
Right. Bankruptcy is usually a lagging indicator behind the other factors. So that's why I say if we can push out the information now to people, maybe they can avoid it and, find some relief before you get to the point where you have to file.
It's gonna have a backlash, and offsetting with the real estate. Matt would probably be best to talk about that because the market's going up, and people are buying houses from up north, but when things start to come to a head here, there's gonna be more foreclosures. It's gonna drop prices as well. I'm wondering where that's all gonna play in the real estate market, how that's gonna happen, where they've got so much building going on, so many foreclosures gonna happen, and so much money flowing in from the up north. Should be real interesting.
Gonna be hard.
Yeah. Well,
Gotta
as
keep
long as,
Matt busy.
yeah. All right. Well, thank you, Harrison, for providing us with that information. Thank you guys for really providing good questions as always. And I think that all of you know how to reach Harrison if you do have anyone that you know. And I look forward to the next presenter next week. I'm going to stop.